Hello, and thank you for joining us for episode 2 of the Zscaler Virtual CXO Summit series, Reducing the IT Carbon Footprint, the Case for Green Security. If you have any questions throughout today, please reach out to cxosummit@zscaler.com. This is a public session, and the opinions expressed in this discussion by third parties are solely those of the guest and not necessarily those of Zscaler. Zscaler does not guarantee the accuracy or reliability of the information disclosed during the discussion. We will be sharing the recording after on our website and encourage you to share and follow using the hashtag Zscaler CXO Summit. We are excited for you to be a part of today's conversation. Please participate by submitting your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and responding to polling questions throughout the session. You'll now see our first live poll. Now, please join me in welcoming EVP of Customer Experience and Transformation, Kavitha Mariappan.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Zscaler's Virtual CXO Summit series. The new enterprise CXO priorities: protect valuable data, optimize performance, and preserve the environment, a three-part series. Today is episode 2, and we'll focus on reducing the IT carbon footprint, the case for green security. Secure digital transformation initiatives rightly focus on improving infrastructure agility, performance, and security. But CXOs are now being asked to meet environmental, social, and governance goals such as clean energy benchmarks. So in a moment, we'll discuss green digital transformation initiatives with our panel of visionary CXO leaders. Following the panel, Zscaler's digital strategist and customer value consultant, Rajat Sharma, and Phil Woon, Zscaler's major enterprise sales engineer, will walk us through a cybersecurity environmental assessment. But first, let's kick off our CXO Perspectives panel. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. JP Saini, Chief Digital and Technology Officer at Sunbelt Rentals. Les Ottolenghi, the former Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer of Caesars Entertainment Corporation. And Bill Choi, the Senior Vice President, Investor Relations and Strategic Finance at Zscaler. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, let's kick off today's fireside chat by learning more about each one of you and your roles. So JP, can you start us off, please?
Thanks, Kavitha. Thanks for having me. And good to have the cast of characters here. I'd say a pretty powerful forum. I'm JP Saini. As Kavitha said, I'm the Chief Digital and Technology Officer for Sunbelt Rentals. I'm about a year in, literally about a couple of days, over a year. It's been an interesting journey. And we'll share some perspective on what this business is all about. This was a new business for me to learn, but good, exciting time. So thanks, Kavitha.
Oh, thank you. Liz.
No, thank you.
Want to take the baton?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is a fantastic topic. Certainly top of mind for many CXOs. And I would say it will become one of the drivers to developing and designing an organization and its security. My background is as the former Executive Vice President at Caesars Entertainment and Chief Information Officer, but now I have just joined Stride Inc. as its Chief Information and Technology Officer. This is Stride is an ed tech company. And it's certainly, this is the topic which is at the forefront of what we think about when we spend money. We do the right things for the organization, and we build a scalable and secure environment for our companies.
Now, congrats on your new role, Les.
Thank you.
Bill, what about yourself? The role of investor relations and strategic finance and ESG.
Yes, thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. So I run investor relations, and a key part of that is serving as Zscaler's ambassador to our investors. And I was previously a sell-side equity research analyst, trying to understand where the market's going. Cybersecurity was one of the key sectors I covered. And having joined Zscaler, great to be part of a team that is disrupting and truly enabling the world for the digital world. So it's my pleasure to be here. I think I was invited here because the investors in particular have been driving a lot of these conversations about becoming more green. And that effort has gotten to a new level. And as a result of that and other ESG related factors, even as we discuss Zscaler to our investors, they really want to understand how we fit in to that broader framework.
Yeah, and you also lead our ESG initiatives and organization here at Zscaler, correct?
Yes, and the way we look at it is ESG is really the primary factors that are impacting all companies over the long term. So if you're a long-term investor, you want to understand how well are you treating your employees, how thoughtful are you about your data security, how thoughtful are you about building your cloud. And these longer term factors become non-financial metrics on which we get judged. And so it became kind of a natural part of my additional duties as we really build out our ESG function here.
It's a lot of work to do, right, across the industry and across the board. No, so thank you for that. Well, let's get right into it. We have 30 plus minutes of what's going to be, I think, a very dynamic discussion. I've led many panels before, but this topic, I think, even in researching and preparing for it and the work we've done, I'm actually quite excited to hear all your perspectives. As we know, CIOs today are faced with a serious mandate of not just ensuring growth and profitability, as Les pointed out, but also protecting the enterprise and ensuring that stakeholder and shareholder welfare is being taken into consideration. So this opens up critical areas of responsibility for any CIO and leadership team to navigate and deliver on. And ESG metrics, as you've all kind of touched upon, are becoming so critical for any business today. So Bill, we'll start with you. My first question really is if you can help us unpack what ESG means to investors and analysts when they're evaluating an organization.
Yeah. So, there was a time when corporations was only responsible for generating maximum profits for shareholders. And that's really no longer the case. The society values are changing. It was surprising to me that 2 years ago, Business Roundtable, which is the largest association of CEOs of our largest global companies, came out and signed this declaration that the corporations are going to be run for the benefit of all stakeholders. That includes customers, employees, communities, and shareholders. And that's just a reflection of what's happening out there. So I think in part, it's heavily being driven by investors who want that accountability from their corporate leaders and even from the board. And it's going to make it down through every organization as this continues. So it is something that I think all the executive leadership, CIOs, CXOs as well, all need to be understanding that that's the new mindset. And with that in mind, a responsible business is really creating value for the society and not exploiting it. And so the dimensions in which people are going to judge companies is ESG. That stands for environmental, social, and governance. And those three factors form this view of long-term societal impact. And ESG tackles a wide range of issues. Climate change is a key one, data privacy, but also diversity and inclusion. And Kavitha, you've been doing a great job trying to get the women in IT moving. So, diversity and that is a key part of, I think, what we all owe the society. So our investors, customers, and increasingly the regulators are asking us to report on these ESG metrics, but in a material, quantifiable, and decision useful way. Is you can't get away as giving anecdotes and saying, hey, we're doing great things. They want you to measure, track, and improve on these metrics. So new level of accountability. So relevant to our topic today, for example, is that investors want greenhouse gas emissions data, which is in aggregate going to be critical to understanding our overall society's collective progress to limiting what is a significant risk emerging of the impact of global warming, right? So, Paris Agreement, for example. And the world's largest asset manager in the world, BlackRock, which if you're a public company, you know that they're typically your top 5 shareholders across the board, and certainly is one for Zscaler. They said no issue ranks higher than climate change on our clients' list of priorities. They get asked about it daily. And so they're putting the pressure on every company to make progress here. And so this is, I think, in part where all of you play a role. Recently, BlackRock was helpful in replacing 3 of the 12 board members at Exxon. This reaches the highest echelon of corporate governance. And so it is becoming a relevant topic. I think when I quick look at my role talking about Zscaler really has an extended role to play because when our customers move to our multi-tenant cloud security, they can significantly reduce their own carbon footprint on dedicated security appliances, right? So, I'm sure we'll be talking about it later, but, one case study we did, a customer in the electric utility industry, they were able to, calculate and reduce their cybersecurity related carbon output by 74%, right? But I think about the broader impact, and that's just the start. Security is a small part of the overall, energy consumption in a given data center. And by securely enabling that secure transformation, you're going to get thousands of servers and storage out into a more efficient cloud. And, as we saw during COVID, Zscaler played a key role in safely supporting productive work from anywhere so that we could all actually work with less commute, which is part of the big greenhouse gas production.
Well, it's just really interesting. Just so many, you touched on so many interesting things, right? I think definitely the Business Roundtable kind of updated statement in 2019 that put this focus on stakeholder welfare, right? And as IT leaders and leadership teams have to balance shareholder value and with stakeholder welfare, but the whole notion of cybersecurity, right, and the whole climate around how security fits into this in a the cyber landscape, right, and it currently has such a significant impact on the S as well as the E, right, because some of the areas that we want to unpack today. I know there are a lot of debates around stakeholderism being overly indexed, but I think putting some focus on that has definitely forced the issue, right, forced the discussion and forced the scrutiny around how organizations are structured and how they report on some of this. So Les, as a CIO, you and your team are constantly charted with focusing on growth and reducing costs and mitigating risks. And on top of that, we're also in the brink of kind of reimagining this future of work as we've all been sequestered in our homes during COVID. I've been stuck with 3 teenagers in my home. I cannot wait to go to a hybrid workforce. What is top of mind for a CIO today, and how does one prioritize?
Oh, it's a fantastic question, and it does include whether you have teenagers at home. Definitely. I think it's a number of things, and Bill just hit on it properly by saying that it is all 3 letters. It's the E, S, and G. Last summer, during the summer of COVID, I hired 23 Duke and Stanford students who are all part of a generation that looks at the world differently than I would suggest maybe even the demographic that's on this particular panel. They see the world through this lens of ESG, unquestionably. They look for the environmental, the social equity, and the proper governance. They want to see accountability against what are values in the way things are run and the way that they think about who they're going to work for and why they're going to work. And then in the way that how they're going to work for it, like you just said, in this sort of remote workforce, in a way that is bound to a better life. And what I asked that group to do, who had all lost their summer internships, so there was a call out from Duke and Stanford, hey, can you hire these wonderful students that don't have jobs now because of COVID? They looked at ESG and they looked at investment in technology in a couple of different lenses. And let me just relate a few of the findings that they came up with. One was that from an innovation point of view, a company that took into account ESG or looked at stakeholderism or looked at an investment even from the venture point of view saw a doubling of their return on investment in technology. So whether it was a startup, the performance was better by twofold over the normal portfolio in a venture fund. And if it was an investment within a company that adhered to the principles of true equity, the true DI and E, saw better performance throughout their team. Now, we tried to reflect this back in Caesars, where we had the most diverse IT organization in Fortune 500. We won an award from Computer World and so on. But we looked at productivity and we saw account ESG. So from a dollars and cents point of view, it was the best decision the company was making in accordance with what it should be accountable for. So we were serving our shareholders as well as our stakeholders. But if you took another step, which was to look at, okay, if you take the ESG and you start to think about the new workforce and an investment in security, for instance, if you take the new approach of zero trust and you take least privilege access and you push it across the entire estate instead of thinking of it as singularly a policy or maybe an approach to cyber defense, you actually reduce the overall spend in your infrastructure. And to the point that was being made about data centers, you actually collapse the amount of power and energy that's necessary, and you get a better and more secure environment, which allows you to then distribute another key thing you have to do as a steward of ESG, which is data sovereignty. You have better security. You are now protecting the rights and privacy of your customers and your trading partners better than any other approach. So zero trust works. And zero trust works at a mechanical level. Reduce your power output, what you have to manage. You're more efficient, but it also increases your responsibility and accountability, and that is measurable. So I would say that for the CXO or the CIO is that having to take into account all the practical things you do in managing your day-to-day infrastructure and operations. You can get there by applying an ESG framework and thinking about approaches like zero trust. Secondarily, if you're thinking about innovation and helping the company grow, it is always about diversity and diversity of thought and diversity of application of new technology, and you get better returns, and those are absolutely measurable. And finally, I think it's an alignment to the future. Your future team members, employees, coworkers, investors, this is how they think. And if you're not a CXO who goes in that direction, you're probably missing the future for your organization.
No, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I think their perspectives, and I think as you were saying this, I had a light bulb go off, right? In the sense that as people look at adherence and compliance, we look at this as a, did I meet, did I comply? Is it a checkbox? You're flipping the rubric to say, can I be ESG native? Do I, as I build my organization, my operations practices and processes, can I be thinking about being ESG native? Because that's the future. So
100%.
that was very, thank you for framing it that way, because I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective. JP, let's move to you a little bit. With we've talked about the landscape with the increase in security threats. I mean, it's unprecedented. I mean, on a daily basis now, it's who is getting breached. It's not if one will get breached. Stopping the next breach is probably one of your most important priorities today. And in fact, when the risk to the franchise is as significant as it is with the increased number of cyber threats, there is a natural and direct correlation to reputation, to growth and profitability. I mean, that leads us to the S in the ESG that we just talked about. And what does that mean to you as an IT executive, and kind of where does ESG sit in your organization's priority?
Yeah, thanks, Kavitha. Let me start with addressing, what ESG really means for us and where does it take hold in our strategy. So we just launched our third strategic era of growth, which is essentially a 3-year strategic plan. And we have 5 actionable it's powered by 5 actionable components, and ESG happens to be one of them. So we're leading with ESG. I'll talk a little bit more about social, since that's something you brought up. Think about, we truly believe rental, and that's the industry we are in, rental of equipment, everything from hand tools to large earth-moving machinery. We believe rental is essential to the environmental progress. Of course, we'll talk about the social here a bit. Safety first. I think that's important. Focus on the success of our stakeholders, our people, customers, our investors. I think Bill touched on the investor community. Everybody's heavy on it. We're publicly traded. So, and then really foster and engage an inclusive workforce. That's also part of the social piece. The career development of our people and the mindset of how we bring social of the ESG in our DNA and not as an afterthought. I started with safety always because safety in our business, everything starts with a safety moment. I think we are doing the same for a cyber moment that we have added. So we're trying to change and affect the culture of the organization where the social aspect of the ESG in all elements, and there's quite a bit of detail behind what social really means in your setting. But everybody has to take participation in that to bring that S to bear. So for us, ESG is front and center, and we'll talk more about it in the session later on what are some of the things we're doing that actually quantifies some of this to the table. So yeah, that's the S for us.
It's good to hear. I mean, it's good to hear that it's top of mind. So Bill, I'm going to shift to you a little bit. We've heard from Les and JP in terms of like their priorities and kind of new approaches, right, of evaluating IT operations and the workforce. They're going to be. It's evident that these CXOs are going to be placing a significant emphasis on security in the enterprise in this current climate, which leads us to what you touched upon earlier: secure digital transformation. Shifting from legacy hardware to a zero trust model that allows an enterprise to better secure its resources and obviously become more agile. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how zero trust and digitization plays into this, and what we bring obviously to the table as Zscaler as well.
Yeah, I think there's been so many examples of companies that have accelerated digital transformation to find new routes to revenue during COVID, to be agile, to be resilient. But one of the risk with that is you do have data everywhere. You're servicing a world that is hyper connected, massively distributed, especially when you start going to market, around the world, right? That's what digital enables you to do. And that data being out there is a huge consequences for the social element. I mean, you just think back to the last several years when you have these, global tech giants that are losing hundreds of millions of account records. And as a society, as you start to become digital, this is an imperative. And so I always think quite a bit about, how do you think about differently when you used to have total control of your environment, all your apps in few locations, in a data center you controlled, in an office building you maintained, with all employees that needed access coming to the office, to this brand new world where, you fast forward, it will be cloud and mobile. And so that distributed element is really where I think people have to start thinking about a new way to protect these data, because you don't control it. And so that's where I was thinking about the zero trust. At some point, it needs to flip over. You can't think in and control. You have to think out and manage, collaborate. And this is where the vendor selections and third-party management becomes particularly important. But I see that in the lens of ESG, investors, et cetera, are looking at that, and in regulators too. Actually, there's this regulation coming up in Europe, which is sustainable governance disclosure regulation. It is holding the board accountable for some of these ESG elements, going down to checking all of your suppliers, right? So that you as an organization, when you rely on others, are vulnerable. So it is a whole ecosystem-based approach that you need to change. And I don't know if maybe it's because I'm at Zscaler, but I can't think of any other way to transition to that world except through a security posture that says nothing is trusted and only on demand, only as allowed by policy. That flip needs to occur, in my view, when you have that distributed element.
I think it's important, right? I think when we look at it in isolation, we don't this, I mean, so much focus on the software supply chain and our vulnerability as part of the software supply chain that we are all interrelated and interconnected in a way that if all of us don't start to think about kind of what the new, this new topology will look like, I think, the impact is significant. How does one create that level of, security immunity, right, for their organization? And it's pressing to be thinking about that at this time. And I think we're also seeing legislation starting to become really stringent. I mean, not just in terms of, ratings and valuation and all of that, but, quite consistent with the Paris Agreement. I think we're seeing large multinational organizations being asked to curb their emissions by as much as 45% by 2030. And that's not that far away. That's 9 years away. And it's a significant shift to their operations and to alleviate sort of this climate, crisis. So I wanted to open it up to all of you really, and JP and Les, specifically from your day-to-day. Are you able to share with us kind of in your business some, real, examples and considerations on how the business is, evolving in terms of use cases? I know JP, you and I talked a little bit about IoT and OT and kind of device proliferation. Les, you and I talked about, transitioning kind of the casino business, evolving into new business models. We can just illustrate some of this in real world use cases as to what this looks like going from, co-located on-prem data centers to a multi kind of distributed environment in your various segments, and how kind of what the carbon footprint looks like, if not for a zero trust model.
Yeah,
I said a lot there, but
No. I think it's great points, and Bill was spot on. It is a bit like JP's business, what's happening in the casino industry. You have shared resources, you have this matching capability that becomes more sophisticated and is more efficient in asset use. So it is effectively this distributed model that Bill was talking about, and where it can be materialized in the world of casinos is that during COVID, in Las Vegas, the casinos were shut down. Now, casinos in Las Vegas only shut down one time in history. I mean, even through 9/11, they stayed open. I'm not saying there were a lot of guests there or anything like that, but they kept the operations running. When President Kennedy was killed, then they stopped operating for 3 days. For COVID now, it was months. In fact, I live in Las Vegas. We went down to the Strip and we could ride our bicycles up and down the Strip, and there was nobody there. There was a family of ducks. They were going across the road. Not something you would normally see in Las Vegas, but it was totally different. And that moment accelerated the new business model, this full digital business model, highly distributed, just like Bill was describing. It's most commonly seen now as sports betting, where there was a repeal of PASPA, and that was 2 years ago. And so with PASPA's repeal, you actually allow for all states in the United States to either accept and allow for sports betting, which, by the way, has to happen in every jurisdiction in its own regulation and with some technology there to support a network, but not a big data center. And frankly, a very distributed business model like Bill was describing, which is now by measure, although the actual revenue isn't as big as the typical land-based casino, is now adding the highest value to the casinos that adopt this distributed model and this ability to interact through a mobile device to do all your wagering around sports. And then eventually it becomes the new business model for all wagering, which is iGaming. So if you have a sports license, you can go into a new jurisdiction and then follow on with iGaming. So the ability to do distributed computing, distributed business, and then therefore do it efficiently is really incumbent upon the casino industry. And it would have to use something like zero trust in order to properly secure and scale and meet the G in the ESG. And one thing I can tell you about casinos and the way that they're regulated is that if you're a named officer in a casino like I was, you go through a financial background check that goes back to age 18, and you have to account for everything that was spent on a check or a credit card. That's how diligent it is. So wanting to get a casino license, you really got to want it. But if you're thinking about all of that kind of regulatory, the regulatory has to be very clear and absolute about where the data is and the integrity of the data in those distributed models. So zero trust and a least privilege access on a broad basis where the data lives in all these different places is absolutely the direction. It also is the most economical one, and is also the one that allows you to go from sports betting to iGaming and to profitability.
Interesting. JP, what about your business? You have a very interesting use case. You're on mute. Sorry. I lost you.
It's very interesting to just whatever Bill and Les were talking about, it just resonates so well. I mean, think of Ubrification of, equipment and tools. Today, if you have to go, rent something, your best bet is to go to Home Depot and rent a tool, which is about $1 billion business in itself. So the opportunity is real. It's what we call prosumer, the pro tools for consumers, and especially with COVID, the appetite for folks to do more by themselves has gone up. There's a concept of light contractors that has come up. So instead of going into a industrial setting and get a machine, you can now, in our case, we had to come up with a complete e-commerce omni-channel play to say, how do we serve the community? So again, a lot of tech at the heart of it. We were on-prem in many ways to power what we do today, and now we're going into best of breed, world-class platforms, about 5 or 6 of them, and all that is in the distributed environment that Les was alluding to. So I think that's a smarter way of running the tech that is needed to transform the offering. As we transform our business, will be in nutshell, the equipment rental industry is going to be under pressure. Some of our peers are going to have to catch up. A good example is if you go back to 2008 to 2007, when the car industry was in turmoil, and it used to cost you $5,000 to get the tech package, with a rear view camera in your car. Today, that's standard. So somebody took the lead, and who's the best beneficiary of it? The consumer. And in all of this, the cars got better. There was a better mandate of emissions. There's better, use of technology. Again, safety comes to mind. Leveraging tech. So in our business, if you really think about it, the whole lubrication of the equipment and tool rental is at the heart of it, powered by some world-class tech. But we're taking it out to the cloud. So we're sharing some of the burden. We're leveraging what we really need to run it, not necessarily run it 24/7 just to have capacity. So that's one aspect of it. And the second piece you have to look at is, how do you connect the entire ecosystem of a business? In our case, if you think about it, you got transportation, you got facilities, you got supply chain, you got rental fleet, everything from extending the life of the rental fleet, so that there is less end of life scrap that comes through that needs to go into the environmental side. To the supply chain side of things, especially on transportation, better tech gives you better route optimization. Think of us as the 17th largest transportation operator in the United States. That's how many 18-wheelers and trucks we own to deliver and pick up our equipment every day, right? So we have a huge footprint. So we have this program called 35 by 30. That means 35% reduction in carbon intensity by 2030. And how do we get there? We have a clear plan to get there. Tech comes heavily into it. And when you go into the distributed environment, which we are already on the path, again, zero trust is at the heart of it. How do you protect those transactions? And you mentioned something on IoT, OT. all of these assets, those are out there. Think of if Les has 5 assets from us and he's using it, 2 assets are running for the last 3 hours, and we're generating emissions. We are looking at, we retrofitted about, close to 200,000 of our equipment that was, we'll call it legacy, which did not have IoT fitted onto it. We retrofitted those. So we now have the intelligence right down to the fuel tank to say, hey, Les, the machine is running for the last 3 hours. You're really not utilizing it. We know how to figure that out because location, utilization, engine, whatnot. And that creates value, that creates stickiness. It contributes to the ESG part. But then how do you protect that interaction between the IoT device and back to where we are aggregating all that intelligence together? Again, I think the whole zero trust model and how do you protect the whole transaction. So I think you bring all that together. It's also changing behaviors, right? If we can offer utilization-based billing, so in that example of 5 assets that I shared for Les, what if we say, Les, we'll only charge you for the number of hours you're actually going to use the machine? Well, all of a sudden, Les is now incentivized to only run the machine for the time he's going to use it. So we're running less fuel, there's less wear and tear on the machine, and all of a sudden you directly drop to the bottom line, in terms of your impact to ESG. So again, there's so many use cases that are in the play. Let me give you one last thing on that to say, if we have an 18-wheeler going out and there are going to be 10 assets on it for delivery and pickup, a better load configuration of these trucks, which today is done with intuition and institutional knowledge, better load optimization that comes right after the load configuration. And then if it's a better optimized, commercial route to say, hey, for you to go take this route, you drop this off first, you pick up this, so you don't have to, one, run more miles, and second, it's easy for you to get equipment on and off. All of that stuff, again, tech at the heart of it, behavior modification at the heart of it, all that coming together, it's beautiful. I mean, it's not something we're just, preaching or on paper. We're actually doing it today. And, my biggest, concern in all of this is, okay, all that is great, we're doing it, but then all these different best of, platforms and partners that come together, how do we really secure our infrastructure and transactions that happen? Ties to the social piece I was talking about earlier. If there is a breach, well, there is that, intellectual property, there is a personal information of our clients and ours that's at stake. So, we have to protect that. So I think this whole thing is so intertwined that when you really start putting the picture together, which we have over the last, year or so, it's intriguing that if each one of us actually start thinking about it in a business commercial outcome way, you'll end up impacting, or making an impact, in a tangible way to the ESG, across the globe.
Right, and I think JP, these use cases are tremendous, right? They're complex, they're significant, and I think at the end of the day, in order to run these operations, to instrument all of this, at the heart of it all, we're not going to be building data centers everywhere. At the heart of it all, that's the inherent message here is that you're going to get more distributed. Your operations are getting more complex. Your workflows are getting more complex. Your workers, your users are more mobile, and that we need to ensure that we're securing all of this whilst ensuring kind of enabling your business to be more agile and innovative, and obviously ensuring a really positive enhanced user experience. So I mean, it's a foregone conclusion that we must start thinking about retiring legacy appliances and and start to move to this new model. And this retirement of legacy appliances and transition to zero trust is the more carbon friendly way. And so I'd like, Bill, if you could take a minute or so and just kind of walk us through what you've seen some of our our customers, how they've benefited from this architectural shift.
Yeah, I think zero trust allows you to not have to buy some of the other tools that you need when you've when you realize how porous your perimeter is, so you need to have layers and layers of other things. So anyways, it is a better security posture. You know, thinking back to kind of the green, I was talking to an investor today, and they want to understand how different we are versus, some of the other legacy vendors that are saying, hey, we could spin up the VM for you. And it's fundamentally built differently when you're built as a multi-tenant. But we talked about how we have this single layer of software that resides in all of our data center that we're constantly improving, 200,000 security updates per day. And we're finding software enhancements. And I think over slightly less than 10-year timeframe, we've like 12x'd the efficiency of a single hardware, right? And you could do things, and you could get the benefit out to your customers. And so when one of the key focuses that when running this global cloud, we want to use renewable energy sources. And today 75%, but we're targeting over 90 by 2025. And you get an immediate view of all of your global employees as a customer, which data centers you use, and we'll give you a singular number of how we are supporting your security needs and what the renewable energy component is, so that you're also informed. So I think, I've seen that knowledge is power, and being able to share those information will enable our customers to think about things differently from an efficiency, the sharing of that data center capacity among thousands of our customers. All of these things you could kind of intuitively get that it is a better way, but we're hoping to find more customers that will go through this and metric it, share it, and also impact your own corporate greenhouse gas emission calculations. And I think our team's really ready to go out and do that with you. But collectively, I think we could have a lot of impact.
That's wonderful. Well, gentlemen, we have come to the end of our Q&A session. We still have, a really exciting, demo to walk everybody through. So I wanted to thank you for your time. I think we could have spent an hour on this and unpacked it further. But I do look forward to many more interesting conversations with you all on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.